Here we are deep in Baltimore on Eastern Avenue. Behind me, this building is the Creative Alliance. It's part of Baltimore's investment into the performing and visual arts. Across the street, you can see a giant 2.5-story mural by Greg Deal, a really interesting street artist. Across the street, you can see the mosaics and even the bus stop. I'm sitting in the bus stop, and it's a giant piece of art.
Eats and beats.
Eats and beats.
Hey, two of my favorite things.
My be making a beat from scratch, as you be making a dish from scratch.
I don't play games when it comes to cooking.
I normally start with the drum.
I'm gonna start with the onion.
I love to merge cultures in my cooking.
Exotic sound. It'll be a culturally influenced situation as well.
So this is the plate.
Jerk roasted chicken with tuna and mashed potato.
Hello, everyone. You are now tuned into Beautifully Uncomfortable. We've been a few episodes in now, and hope you're enjoying it. This show is brought to you by Words, Beats, and Life, as you know, and we have an esteemed panel tonight. So we're going to grab those folks, and here we all go. Yay. Awesome. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. But I'm I'm just happy to have you here. I'm delighted that you joined us. And Candice, I'm going to go around and sort of in the order that it shows on my screen. So Candice, introduce yourself first.
Okay. Hello, how are you? My name is Candice Mills, and I already know you, girl.
Yes.
But I'm a vocalist here in the DMV area. I have a 17-year-old son who's a breakdancer. He's in the arts as well. I had a residency with CI at the 18th Street Lounge for it was roughly 14 years, and that closed. It was every Wednesday night, and I played in a group called Future that was also rock and hip hop based. So I think people will probably know that about me before anything else. I live here in Arlington right now, and I'm still playing music. So it's like me in a nutshell. Just
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see you again.
You too.
And then Sheneka, let's have you introduce yourself.
Hey guys, my name's Sheneka. I kind of grew up in this music industry. Born in Jamaica, grew up in the South Bronx, and I'm working PR, so I do a lot of festivals, mostly international, here in the States too. And I'm currently living in Los Angeles, but music has been born into it, you know what I mean? So that's all I know, and that's what I'm doing now. I love it, so can't complain.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Where are you located?
I'm in LA.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
and
I live in Los Angeles.
Awesome. And Candice, I did not ask you because I know you are a globe trotter. So where are you tonight?
I'm sorry, were you talking to me?
Oh, I'm asking where are you tonight because I know you are a globe trotter and usually all across the world. So where are you?
Oh, right. So no, I'm at home actually today.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So since COVID, man, I just take that time when I need it.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
You know, so slow down a little bit. Things are a little bit different, you know.
Yes. And let's we've just got Ian added on, but Jamal, let's go next to you.
Peace. Yeah, I'm Jamal Reid. How y'all doing? Good to see you.
Great, good to see you.
Great. I am all over the place. I'm one part of the Amphibians, which means I used to MC and DJ, and as parts of Words, Beats, and Life back in its early days, I used to teach graffiti classes as well as DJ classes, hip hop classes all around. So all elements. Yeah. And nowadays, coach snowboarding, do remodeling in my mom's house. So I am in Ohio at the moment, but I'm based out of Vermont. we'll see how long that is. So yeah, that's about it.
Yes. It's so good to see you, Jamal. I haven't seen you in a long time, but I'm happy the amphibians are back on the map. And yes, I'll be on your show next week. So I'm looking forward to talking to Joe Villa. Yes. AKIR, let's get you next. Tell us about yourself.
Peace. My name is AKIR. I'm a MC out of New York, but also DC. I went to Howard, so I cut my teeth quite a bit down in DC. I was down there for about 10 years or so. Yeah, I'm part of a collective called Rebel Arms, Mortal Technique, Chino XL, Poison Pen, Swabe Sever, just to name a few. I'm a producer as well, entrepreneur of all different types, and most currently, I've been doing a lot of work in television and film, and as a crew member.
Awesome. Yes, another long tenured history. And so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and sharing that. Ian, I know, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for inviting me on tonight. My name is Ian Taranji. I am a musician. I'm an asylum lawyer representing primarily Central American migrants in immigration courts seeking asylum. But also a musician, composer, jazz composer with the Lucky So-and-So's with MC Artemis, and then also a podcast host with Tia and Artemis, the show Grande Lock, the Grandiloquent hip hop show. And so we do about every other week or so, we review current releases, classic hip hop albums, and then just kind of like what's going on in hip hop culture. So honored to be here, and thanks for having me.
Currently,
thank you. Doing a lot. Sorry, I couldn't get my mute off. I apologize for that. So thank you again to everyone for joining us tonight. I am going to hop right into some questions if I could. And Flex Mathews, as you know, produces the show and works really hard to think about questions to surface, really get us to have conversations that open up dialogue. And so one of these questions tonight are focused on cultural appropriation. I wanted to start with the definition of cultural appropriation, which is the adoption of an element or elements of one culture or identity by members of another culture or identity. This can be controversial when members of a dominant culture appropriate from disadvantaged minority cultures. All words I feel like are very disadvantaged minority are always controversial words. I feel like in today's time, not very asset-based, kind of strength-based language. But based on that definition, which itself sounds like it needs to be updated, is hip hop as we know it today? Is this what we would consider hip hop as we know it today, or where it's headed? And I posed that to everyone on the panel that would be open to answering it. And Sheneka, there was a side question on sort of the same for reggae music. Is it headed this way in terms of cultural appropriation? Does anybody care to start us off with the answer on that?
I can.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I would actually, because when Flex talked to me about doing this, I had recently seen an article that they were talking about hip hop and appropriation, like what it's a fine line between appreciating something and appropriating something. And they brought up the Miley Cyrus example and how she went from doing country music, kind of Hannah Montana, and then goes into this this weird, I guess, phase where she's with rappers, and it's what was going on at the time, and she jumped right on it. And then when asked why she decided not to continue doing it, she said, "I feel like rap is disgusting. I feel like it's sexualized, and I don't. There were so many things that she was describing it as, but also in my mind, I'm like, you chose to do this, and this is what, whether she was pushed by her company to do it or not. To me, it just seemed like she jumped on what she thought would be the hottest next thing, and she didn't get a lot of praise for that. In the end, it really left a lot of bad taste in people's mouth when she did that, and some were even arguing that by her saying that, like, I guess people were just saying, okay, maybe that's a phase or that's a genre she wanted to try, but by her saying, this is the reason I stopped, because rap is disgusting, hip hop is disgusting, and they over sexualize, and I don't know. I found that to be a large problem, because there are lots of I feel like there are lots of white artists who do that. Justin Bieber, I mean, those are just a few of the examples that I saw when I was reading this, and I know that you were saying something about reggae. Also, I was also thinking about a flyer that I saw where it was all really young white reggae bands, and all the legends like Jimmy Cliff, I forget who, Burning Spear was at the bottom in fine print. And when you see a flyer and the headlining bands are at the top with the big, I mean, you really put Burning Spear at the bottom.
Wow.
With I think Lee Scratch Perry was on that same one. And so I ended up commenting on it because I saw it on Facebook, but I ended up commenting on it, and people were quick to try to defend it. But to me, I mean, that's just disrespectful. To me, that is not appreciation. To me, that is all the way appropriation, and I think it's disrespectful, personally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I think I live in a city full of culture vultures, aka Los Angeles, California, and it's just hard to deal with and hard to see. And speaking on what you have mentioned, not just with reggae, and I mean, this is something very near and dear to my heart. I am the daughter of a reggae legend, and it was hard for me working in festivals in PR, especially here in California, where you would see those legends, even hip hop legends, be replaced on headlines for these festivals. And it's local white roots surf reggae.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of part of the reason why I started working in the industry more outside of the country. Because outside of the country, our legends are appreciated and, have more love. So people always ask me, like, why is it that you only work at festivals in Europe and Asia and South America? Because I feel like we're a little bit more respected. And, it's hard to just explain to people. But I think growing up in this industry or growing up around it, my father's Bunny Ruggs, who was the lead singer of Third World. So I grew up in studios with legends and around Jimmy Cliff and Burning Spear and Dennis Brown and all these people my whole life. And I've seen them not get their flowers or the respect that they're deserving because of people taking our culture, taking our music, our style, remixing it themselves, and now making a killing, making more money, getting more clout, getting more acknowledgement than some of these legends ever had their entire lives. So it's definitely visible. I know, Oscar Wilde always says imitation is the best form of flattery. For me, it's insulting. I can't speak for anybody else, but it's definitely here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, rest in peace to your father. It's an amazing legacy that left behind. Does anyone else want to comment on that additionally in terms of, especially speaking from a global perspective, and how different cultures maybe view the lens of Black art and hip hop and reggae and Black music?
I would
go ahead.
Go ahead. This is an interesting conversation to me only because I don't think most people would have much of an idea about hip hop if it wasn't put through the capitalist lens of like basically sold to people. And usually when it's sold, once you start selling something, once it becomes something to market, then it goes into the business atmosphere and becomes what people feel they can do with it to make money off of it. So the things that the conversation about cultural appropriation within hip hop and music in general is a hard conversation for me because I feel like whenever a genre grows, it's gonna take on a different life because it's gonna take on what people who gravitate towards it seem to start taking from it and trying to do, and then do whatever from there. So like you have jazz obviously as one of our more recent examples. So it's a hard conversation for me because I feel like it's just kind of a known that that's what's going to happen, that we've all watched it happen from as early as watching Breaking. Because I mean, everybody, I should just leave it at that because it's just to me that once you saw once the capitalist structure gravitated towards hip hop and started trying to sell the dance part and realized they couldn't really sell the dance part, so they started selling the rap part.
Yeah.
And they knew that that was the thing because they couldn't sell the DJ. It was the rapper that they were able to sell. Well, then that's kind of how hip hop became known to most people. But it was that dichotomy where people were like, well, those who were true to it, understand the elements, understand like they kind of try to stay on this path and keep it dear. And even with it going all over the world, you have many people who try to stay true to that. That's what's so fun about seeing the festivals in Germany and Asia, like where people are really trying to hold the elements and stay true to them. But at the same time, it's like for most people to have even seen it, it had to have been marketed to them. And usually once that starts happening, it gets diluted. And it is no longer what those who kind of feel true to the core feel it really is or should be. So, yeah, I have a hard time even thinking that it's worth having a conversation. I mean, it's a conversation, but I feel like it's almost a given. Like it's known that that's what's happening.
That commodification happens, and then
right. It's just a matter of how much you really want to talk about it or how deep you want to dive into it. Because even like especially when you talk about reggae, like because I look at music as like when you see people do covers, like when you do a cover of a song, it's like, okay, cool. I get to hear the song done by another person, but do I really want to hear that person do the song? Like, do I really want to see them like try to make the song their own? Because if you just do it the same way the person did it, well, then you're just copying it. It's even though it is, you're doing the cover, but so nobody wants to see you try to sing the song the exact same way the original person who you kind of know sang it. But then you try to go all over the place with it. Then people are gonna look at you like, well, what are you doing? Like, so it's a hard deal for me to think about, like, because I just understand that, especially with art, people have to copy in order to even elevate their styles. Because they have to get an idea from somewhere. It's hard for people to just come up with something brand new that no one's ever heard or seen before.
Right.
So usually you're pulling from elements, and it's just a matter of how do you treat it when you start doing that. So yeah, I don't know. It's a hard conversation for me.
I mean, I think a lot of what the debate exists on is the part of paying homage, right? So like in most of these cultures that were described as, I forget what were the incendiary terms that were kind of in that definition that we were talking about in the beginning, but
minority and disadvantaged.
Right. What I would say is native and black people. If we want to keep it funky, right? And in many of our cultures, there is a coexistence between the art and some sort of faith-based space, responsibility to our people, our heritage, so on and so forth. So, when I guess the part of it that I look for is trying to find that defining space that lets me know that this is not a shared experience. This is someone exactly taking and not reciprocating in any way, shape, or form. Like I forget who it was that I was watching on one of these platforms, but they were talking about someone sampling their song, and them themselves as a hip hop artist, most of their catalog is probably sampled from, the 60s and 70s, what have you. But they were talking about a contemporary artist, and they were saying that, at the very least, the guy could have gave me a shout out. You know what I mean? Or at the very least, when he did the video, he could have included me in the video. Something that would have generated some sort of attention back towards his brand or whatever, and in terms of the cloth that I'm from and the people that were before me, what was passed to me, with that microphone was the necessity to create that symbiotic relationship and further what was given to me. You know what I mean? Right. In all the cultures that I'm made of, even down to, cooking or building something or what have you, it's well known and taught that it's your responsibility now to teach somebody, bestow that gift upon someone else and give its due from where you got it from. That's the exchange. You're just simply a conduit. I think that's the real problem here, is that, hip hop is being used, as a disposable item versus versus some sort of space of legacy and heirloom. You know what I mean? That's the part of me that's what kind of rips me apart when I see that part. Isn't I think at its earliest stages, you're talking about Black kids and Latino kids getting busy and building something together, and as it goes further and further, you see other people from different places starting to share that craft. But I think it's really easy to see when somebody's just wearing it like a hat, you know what I mean, and tossing it away. How many other people from other genres, let alone whatever the racial and financial issues, blah 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 blah. But like, let's talk about pop artists, like how you were talking about before, R&B artists and what have you. Yeah, they go and kick it with some hip hop artists, for this record. And if that record don't do well, or people don't respond to it appropriately, or something else happens to pop up on the charts in that space and time, that's a better fad, so to speak, they immediately discard it. They'll walk right past the person that they had a hit single with last season, because now that person is involved in something that their PR person told them to stay away from, or they happen to fall down on the charts or what have you. And it gets frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love for you to comment on that. And you also, which I don't know if you mentioned, your Lucky So and So's. It's also a band. Yeah.
Yeah. So I consider myself a jazz musician. I play in Lucky So and So's, which is sort of the vehicle for music that I compose and that I write, and that is sort of a jazz hip hop hybrid. And so this is an interesting conversation, and I think everybody has made really, really great points, and it's been really interesting to listen to all these different perspectives. The issue of cultural appropriation. Look, I play jazz. That is a Black art form. I'm in a hip hop group. That's a Black art form. And so the issue of cultural appropriation to me is one that I think about a lot, because I don't want to disrespect an art form. I don't want to disrespect a culture. I play jazz, and I've been studying jazz intently for close to 15 years. and I still consider myself like a jazz novice. I mean, I've been a musician for over 30 years. I've been studying jazz intently, well over 10, and just, I'm probably going to die feeling that I'm a jazz novice. So the way I try to think about it is, one, respect the art form, two, respect the culture from which that art form grew, and then three, try not to be something that I'm not. I'm not trying to give some kind of authenticity beyond what I am. I'm a white guy who grew up in white Midwest suburbs, and just came into jazz just by being a musician. I came into hip hop by being a musician. I grew up as a blues guitar player outside Chicago, and so another African American art form. And you recognize that, and to me, it's important to study and respect the form, to understand the cultures that those art forms came from, and then, like I said, just to try not to be something that I'm not. To try and I mean, I am who I am, and I present my art, and I hope that I can give back to the form, that I'm respecting the form by studying it, by understanding the history, and that's really where I try to come at this from. I think the points about commercialism are really important. Any art form that becomes commercialized, and that can dilute the art form. And to me, it's important to just really be clued in with with the art form. And so studying it, learning about it, and also loving it and enjoying it, to me, that's really important.
Now, thank you for sharing that perspective. Do you, I think, and I'll rotate this back around, but there's a question here on whether or not the issue is about emulation or compensation. How and thinking about why cultural appropriation tends to be overlooked. I think, what I'm wondering how you all view that through your lens, in terms of, is this a conscious choice that people are making? Are they doing it unintentionally? Why are people not noticing that there is a cultural appropriation issue, and how are they not preventing that, or acting against being a indirect violation, I guess, of that? Anyone?
So you remember when Robin Thicke came out with that song, and he was and that was a big
The Blurred Lines?
Yes, yeah. I couldn't remember the title of it. But that was also a big I mean, that was also him just flat out just taking from it. But other than that, what the popularity of it when it came out, even afterwards, and people knowing where it came from, it just didn't seem, I guess, like such a big deal. I mean, it didn't really suffer from that. Actually, people wanted to hear it more and stream it more because of that. So I have to agree with Jamal in a way with because it is hard. Because yes, if it was gobbled up. Hip hop has been just taken from so many different artists, and from all over the world. And when I was in Russia, I remember when we were on tour, we were told that there was this one school that knew that we were coming, and they wanted so bad to perform for us. So we get there, and everybody has a Black musician that is their favorite. And these kids from, I don't know, from 5 or 6 years old
Mm-hmm.
They literally have studied, I mean, facial expressions, tones, songs, lyrics. I mean, of all of these Black artists that they absolutely worship. And when they, each one of them stood in front of us and they started, you know, performing whatever they prepared, you could close your eyes and literally you couldn't tell some of them from some of your favorite jazz artists. It was incredible how much they really, really, really were into these artists. And it makes me think that a lot of times it is because this comes naturally for Black people, because this is our music. I feel like there are some people, some artists who feel like that is their standard for success, for making it. Once I know that I'm there and I can, like how the producers for Pink, you know, how they put her out as an R&B artist, and they're like, okay, if you can get to this point and get capture this audience, you know, once she got to do whatever she wanted to do, she had already met that standard, you know. So I don't know. I feel like yes, it is kind of hard to be able to it's not always in every situation, like I gave with the respecting the reggae artists and the legends. I mean, but I don't feel like some of the places that I've gone while traveling, I don't feel like it's disrespectful, because for some reason I feel like they're just really it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's something that they really enjoy, something they don't take for granted. So
you don't, in that case, it has a little bit of nuance, it sounds like, because depending on who is sort of is adopting the music or adopting the culture, how it's being adopted and how it's being framed, maybe like the framework around it a little bit. Anyone else care to comment on that?
I mean, I think it's important to not be copying. Copying is not artistry. I don't see. I mean, obviously, it takes some skill to be able to perform. You know, and I know that a lot of jazz musicians will transcribe, you know, like the Coltrane solo on, Coltrane solo on Kind of Blue, and it's, you know, copying is one thing. I think when jazz artists are transcribing something, they're doing it with the intention of learning and adding things to their own arsenal. You know, and I've played, you know, I've been a musician for, you know, over 30 years, and I've played a lot of different styles. I mean, I'm pretty much a one instrument player on guitar, but I've, you know, played a lot of different styles. And so I feel like getting all of that under my fingers has helped me develop a unique style. And so my hope is that when I compose and when I write music, that I'm giving something back and you know, I don't want to say elevating the art form, but hopefully giving something back, and not just copying and not just trying to pass something off.
Now I wonder, I think it's interesting, and Jamal, maybe you can insert this a little bit, but think about Bob James and the recent sort of turn now where he is embracing his music being sampled, but for many years was against that, and sort of the idea of kind of a turn on the, almost kind of like an internal argument, I don't know, that he might have been having with himself over how the music was being sampled or without his permission. Now that he's given permission, any comment to that, Jamal, at all?
Well, it's funny to me because there's a couple sides to the taking of something, utilizing it, and then putting it back out with whatever you've decided, whether you were going to remake it, spin on it, or what have you. The whole idea of cultural appropriation, to me, it's very funny because I liken it to conquerors, especially kind of the Mongols when Genghis Khan would conquer, or even Romans when they would conquer an area, they would take people from that area into their community. So they would kind of fold them in and then take of that community and then expand. And with hip hop, a big thing for us is to take what was out there, what we had, and bring it into what we've got going on, and then expand it, turn it into something else, re-innovate it, what have you. So for others to look at it and not see the idea of cultural appropriation, I can understand that, because they see that whenever something is done, that usually you take something and then you do something with it and bring it back out. And it's just about how you do it. And what we've kind of been talking about is kind of like, well, who's doing it, or what are the kind of basics, or what's the respect element that they're giving to it. And so, like, say with Bob James, it's like most people who've heard the songs that have sampled him would have no idea who Bob James was unless they started to finally delve into those songs, like delve into the actual samples, unless you had an ear that made you go, you know, I want to find that. Or you started, you know, like that's how I got to learn a lot of soul music, was just starting to figure out the samples that were in a lot of the songs that I really love. And for me, that's kind of a standard that we're holding right now as far as what we feel is appropriation or not. Whether you listen or view and then delve into it, or whether you just take it on and shed it and add another thing and don't really have any cares about what it really is. You just thought it looked cool at the time, utilized it, and then moved on to the next thing. And it for people as artists, if you're an artist, it's kind of like, you know what, you're going to do what you want. You know, like, look at Prince. I mean, he's going to be what he decides he wants to do at whatever time. You know, you can't really say because he played rock that he's just a rock artist. You know, like, so, and then I go back down the line of, okay, well, appropriation of rock, like all those things. These things to me, it's like it really comes down to how does the person hold whatever it is that they are putting on, and does it mean anything to them? If it doesn't mean anything to them, well, then there's your answer on the appropriation part.
AKIR, it looks like you had some comment you were about to make on that. I think you're muted.
I agree with a lot what Jamal was saying. I mean, you know, it's interesting because there's so many. It's such a dynamic conversation. You know, if you put on one hat at a time, you know, I think it gets a little bit clearer to me. But looking at it, the whole space conceptually, I mean, even like talking about Bob James, right? Like, how many people? I mean, I don't know this to be true, but I can only imagine how many people probably thought, you know, that he was appropriating jazz music, you know, when he first started or starting to get popping, and then, you know, then you find him being like one of the most sampled people in hip hop, and then what's to say that he didn't feel that people were appropriating his music, and then, you know, now that he's opening up and, you know, everything is changing, you know, so you've got that. Then you also have the whole difference in perspective of whatever's going on contemporarily. Like, you know, I'm also a hip hop educator, so, you know, there's times where I have these certain rules and this certain foundation and basis that won't allow me to make certain moves because I feel like it's disrespectful to our heritage. To me personally, it doesn't fit what I want to represent. It's not something that I would want my children to, you know, it's not something I want to pass on to my children, whatever. And they absolutely proceed with reckless abandon. they may not care who they offend, where it comes from. However, they just know that like so and so had it on the last record. This is what's hitting right now. I need to look. This is what's going on. And you know, there's been so many times where you know we've come to disagreements, and I've had to step away from the board and say, hey, you know, show me what you got at the end of it, because I don't understand that perspective. You know, but then that's me also being a hypocrite, because it's also a piece of what I know youthful music to be, not only hip hop, but just to be able to challenge whatever the status quos are and say, okay, well, I'm going to try it this way. And in that reckless abandon and in that youthful spirit, you know, the times where you hit on something that nobody thought would work is amazing, and is heralded for the rest of time. But there also is opportunities where you gonna smack it to the wall and you did something absolutely wrong, and you got to come back and be able to, you know, to have a conversation in some way, shape, or form, whether it be through the art form or through whatever, with your fan base or with the culture that you were representing. And I don't think the people that I feel who are appropriating bear that responsibility. They only bear that responsibility when the titties come out of the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? That's the only time where they want to, have the apology in front of all the press. It's on that next album, provided that no one inquired longer than 3 months or so, it would never be addressed. It'd be swept under the rug. Trust and believe that. But if it keeps going, then you're like, okay, well, we have to clean it up. Boom, 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 boom. So then, like, how real is that apology? And I don't know. It's twisted, man. It's twisted. Only thing I know is that me and Miles, we gotta have a beacon. That beacon is in our heart and our spirit, and and our lineage and responsibility to that. All this weird stuff going on, man. A lot of it, I honestly, I can't let it inundate me in what I know is my true calling.
I wonder, Sheneka, Flex has a great question here about labels and companies, but I wonder, before we get there, I would love to hear your feedback on this, just because, I mean, Third World has been sampled so much, from Freddie Gibbs to Mos Def to so many different people. How does that feel for you, having that sort of firsthand experience with that?
So I think Ian had touched on it earlier. I think if you're doing it consciously or just having that respect given back to the artist, or acknowledging or having that thought process, I think it's okay. Sorry about that. I have, artists that I work with who, are fans, who are Caucasian, who want to do the music and have asks about respect or wanting to do something and say, I don't want to disrespect, but I still want to honor. Most artists don't ask. Most record labels don't ask. Most people don't ask. And it's so funny you talk about sampling, because a lot of those artists at times don't acknowledge where those songs come from, especially when it's of Jamaican artists or any type of reggae African artist. There's no acknowledgement. There's, within my life, meeting children of other famous people. I met children of Fela Kuti, and he's been sampled, and people don't acknowledge him or his work or things that he's done. So it's very difficult sometimes, especially growing up in it. Even when I started working in the industry, nobody knew whose kid I was. I never used that as a way to get me up in the ladder, or I was interning at MTV when I was 18 years old. I worked my way up in the music industry with no one ever knowing who my dad was, and just kind of sitting in a room with people sampling his stuff, and I'm like, I know they didn't ask for permission, or it's been difficult. It's been difficult to see these things happen and wonder what had happened within the industry, why these people think these things are okay. I mean, God rest his soul, my dad passed 7 years ago, and within his passing, people now realize whose kid I am and whose kid it was that was working with them and taking them overseas and working with them in other countries. I mean, it's a very different world. I mean, we all sample. We come music industry samples. I mean, 2 weeks ago when they were doing the verses, I saw so many comments or people posting videos saying their children, their grandchildren didn't know that that song was the Isley Brothers song or Earth, Wind and Fire song, or, oh, you know, I thought that was a Beatles song, or I didn't know, Ernie Isley wrote that song. So it's definitely, you know, I think as long as the honor is given or just the notoriety, to me, it's not even a money thing. It's just being respectful. And there's a lot of people who aren't respectful. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, not only just hip hop, you have to understand for me too. I mean, I left from Kingston, Jamaica and landed in the South Bronx. So, another mecca of music and hip hop, and being around the early 90s, the artists, the people who are still there. I mean, even those hip hop legends, and, coming up in New York City, and you're like, wow, you learn a lot and you see a lot. But I think it's just up to us. And AKIR touched on it, just having a consciousness or not wanting his children to do these things. I think it's our job to educate these generations that are coming up and let them know where things are coming from, because a lot of them don't. A lot of them are lost.
Well, do you speaking of that and thinking about Flex's next question, is there any responsibility on labels and executives and companies to do any of this, to do maybe edify artists, or maybe have some particular curriculum even that they introduce around this? Is there any responsibility there at all?
There should be, but is there, in my opinion, not much or not enough? But there definitely should be.
Jamal, I see you. Perfect. There you go.
Well, the conversation that we seem to be having, or the kind of the point that seems to be a sticking point for appropriation is centered around ethics and morals. And then you're asking a business to have ethics or morals. And I know as a business student, there were business ethics classes, but to go into the real world and look at business, that is, that is something you can't regulate. So it really comes down to the population who actually want to have the history shown or make sure that it maintains a standard. So as you had said, it's kind of up to us if that is something that we feel is necessary and we hold dear to consistently be on artists, labels, companies, to hold them accountable, because they don't hold themselves accountable. They won't hold themselves accountable to something like that because they're in it for profit. So whatever profits is what they're going to be steering towards. And if it hits their profit, meaning that if we're boycotting or doing things that basically take away from them making money because we feel it doesn't meet a standard, that's the only way you would actually be able to get businesses to kind of hold themselves to a standard. Because like AKIR had said it, until it happens in front of the world and the world holds you, accountable for something that they see that they don't feel fits their moral compass, you're able to just skate along and do whatever you want to do until something like that, until you're brought to the carpet for something like that. So, and right now, the masses don't seem to care about what we seem to care dearly about within these cultures, within this music. But it's kind of the same thing with having a hip hop union. Until the culture sets forth a standard and really starts holding individuals and companies accountable, it's going to be very hard for you to see a company just decide, okay, yeah, we're going to do it. And no one's going to, they didn't have really anybody pushing them to do that. So.
Right. That's an interesting question, especially today where so many companies are now doubling down on their commitment to create equality and parity, recognizing that it is hitting their bottom line. So is it an issue around revenue and whether or not they're being compensated to educate artists or to educate others on how they should be regarding art? Anybody else have any other commentary on that?
Yeah, I think that not all labels are created equally. I think that there are certain labels that care about elevating the art. I think that there are certain labels that care about the form generally beyond just the artists that are signed to that label. And then there are labels, you know, we all know which ones they are, that are just corporations, you know, caring about the bottom line. And whatever's going to hit is going to hit. Whatever's going to stream 1 million streams, that's what they want. And it's less about art and it's less about art forms and elevating artists than it is about a product and marketing a product. So I think not all labels are created equal, but all labels are trying to make a buck. They're certainly trying to recoup their costs. They're trying to make a profit, and you know, so that commercialism always has a distorting effect on art, and you know, so yeah.
Wonderful. If I might head to another question, I think that adds into this that the cultural appropriation of today is much different than that of the intentional cultural appropriation for minstrel shows with blackface. And today's example are not necessarily as visceral as the 1830s as we think about, or 1930s, or even, I mean, there is certainly additional elements of that. But again, I think we kind of keep revolving around this idea around sort of how cultural appropriation is happening. How do you think it could be prevented? Especially because it's not as in your face or as visceral as it has been in the past. What kind of measures can people do to assure that they don't activate that?
Well, I don't know if this has anything to do with the question, but I just thought of it. And I think this plays a little bit of the part in why I've had very few MCs that I knew that I did this. This was not something I did consciously, but I realized after I went to a couple of jam sessions and they had a band there. So a couple of kids went up there and literally, I mean, and they were white rappers and every other word was the N word. And I know they were kids, but I wanted to throw stones. I legit wanted to throw stones. Like, that's the kind of, when I talk about respect, it's things like that. Of course, yes, they were also wearing do-rags, so that's like it's become part of hip hop culture, but it's also like, for real, why are you doing that? So I don't know if that is even anywhere near what you were asking in your question, but it was just something that I thought about.
Mm-hmm. I think that's important. Archetypes and artifacts of culture that are also taken as well.
Because I used to skate and skateboard, and I had friends from everywhere, and my dad would all take us out. He built a ramp for us, and there was literally, when I say it was just diverse, and it wasn't anything for us to literally have like classic old school hip hop and then throw on some Beastie Boys, you know. And I never felt that strongly in a negative way that was appropriation. I feel like they had a different way of expressing their love for hip hop and how they did it. Like I said, there are ways that you can educate people on how how to show respect, while also being inspired by what you write and what the music that you make. But you could just start by doing that, by calling out people that, like I said, at that jam session, the kids that just kept throwing that word around, and they kept emphasizing it too, just every time they would say it. So, you know, it's those kind of things that I feel like when we talk about respect. And like with the flyers, when I was talking about the reggae festival that was happening and all the legends were at the bottom, you know, that that kind of respect, not just profiting off of it. And then, you know, there are so many artists that I know that really they are the foundation of a certain genre, any of them, and they literally either die broke from mismanagement, or meanwhile the people that have taken it upon themselves to recreate or emulate to the point where it's like biting from them, and they are flourishing, you know.
All great points. Anyone else want to comment on that specifically?
I'm sorry because I keep talking, but to me it's a matter of standards and practices. When we were part of Freestyle Union, whenever you went into the cipher, whenever the bitch ho nigger words came out, you were shut down. So it was always known, like if you're new to the whole deal, it didn't matter. Once you stepped into the center and you started to do something that was outside of the standards and practices, you were readily made aware of the fact that you're out of bounds. What we as a culture have to kind of do is literally take control of our own destiny. And that's on so many different levels. So it really comes down to those who hold it dear to start to kind of really speak in unison, as opposed to being the hater, the one crotchety old black man that wants to always say back in my day. It really comes down to, because Ian is totally right, and I'm sorry that I totally glossed over that fact, is that there are labels, and then there are the labels that make up what the labels get. Because as amphibians, we have our label. Like, we are our own label. As myself, I have my own label. As Spread Love Entertainment, my own label. So I hold standards for what I will release and what I will actually put any money into or any time into. And it's up to us, as far as within the culture, to kind of be moving on that way and actually working with those who we see working in that same vein, so that we can actually gather that strength in numbers to set those standards and set those practices, so that it becomes a space where people feel almost as if they should be, like they fear doing things that are against the whole, because they know that as soon as they start to do those things, someone's going to be coming up to let them know. It's already been seen. They've seen it happen to others, so they already know that that's a viable outcome if they go down that route. And that's things like, because we are all in that age group that is above 30, we are the ones who have that space where it's like, okay, most of us have started raising children, have had jobs for a while, have done things that we've kind of like taken us from being locked into the culture on the way that we were when we were, say, like in our teens and early 20s, where it was like that was all we cared about, that is all we do. And in building from there is kind of, like we were hoping to be wherever we were going to be in that culture. As we've grown older, life hits you, but it's also one of those things where it's like, okay, well, there's so many things for me to try to keep my mind on. I can't be focused on who's doing what on the internet, who's doing what on, like these are things. But if you have a group aspect as opposed to an individual aspect, then you have the ability for people to monitor and actually address things and have backing, instead of it feeling just individuals doing it.
Like here, I wonder if you would shed some light on that too, especially thinking about it from like a nonprofit lens and working with youth, and how are youth sort of viewing this? Is this something, because I always feel like there's such a disconnect between everyone is saying Gen Z feels this way, and you know they're not as respectful, they're helping to contribute to some of these problems. Is how are youth sort of thinking about cultural appropriation? Are they?
I mean, to be honest, I haven't been active as a direct educator with the organization in some time, but I still uh, serve as a mentor and have little brothers and this, that, and the third. But from what I'm getting, to be honest, there's a large difference generationally between my generation and I guess what would be the teenagers of today. In that, like I said earlier, they proceed with like reckless abandon, and um, directly to us as a generation, I think there's many of us that, including myself, at some point in time, have made missteps in educating them and showing them the plethora of examples within the hip hop community and the history behind behind hip hop as a music, and more importantly as a culture. I mean, there was a piece that I sampled. There was actually a time where Ice Cube and Soldier Boy were going at it, and I found this commentary so interesting. Basically, to get direct to the point, Soldier Boy had Ice T had made some sort of comment on Soldier Boy's music, and he kind of acknowledged out loud that that he didn't approve of his music, and that he felt that he was quite ignorant, and he was just going all about it wrong. And Soldier Boy responded to Ice T from his multi-million-dollar mansion that he bought for his mother and his siblings, and said, like, my favorite rapper is 50 Cent. You know what I mean? Like, nobody gave me a hip hop care package, so if you really cared that much, you would have got in touch with my people and you would have put me on. Or you would have came visit me, you could have wrote me a letter, this email, social media. And to be honest with you, I can't say that many of the comments that Ice-T was making about Soulja Boy's music and movement were foreign or much different than my opinions at that time. But to be able to hear him clearly state himself that way really was an eye opener to me, because I kind of had an idea about it based on my experiences with the kids, but he said it really, really clear. And then he also went on to say, how dare you, as a matter of fact, how dare you come at me that way when you were once a teenager making something out of nothing. And, in comparison to where my counterparts are, what could have happened, you see me talking to you from the house that I built for my family. So learn how to help, don't criticize me. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, because I do have to understand them at that point. And I do have to understand that, as Jamal was saying, I am growing into a different phase of my life. And I'm trying to be very cognizant of being that old guy on the porch, because that doesn't offer a opportunity for growth. That stagnates us and separates us. So, even when they bring me something that I really consider garbage, I have to take a breath. I have to clear my mind, and I gotta give them, most importantly, my ear and time to check it out. Once the composition is done, and I've really given my effort to pay attention, then I can, I don't know whether we curse or not, but then I can, I can destroy whatever concept that they think, you know, is the new wave or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But I need to be knowledgeable of it, especially if I'm asking them to be knowledgeable of the history and the art form itself. So again, like there's no one real answer here. I can only exude what it is that, you know, that I have and was passed to me, and then, you know, watch them grow and help them grow, you know. And definitely, you know, I have my I have my lines. I don't know if they're defined as much as I want them to be, but let them know when I think they've, you know, that they're veering off track. If they decide to take that road, you know, that's on them. But as an advisor, as a mentor, I could say, hey, you know, I don't know if it's the greatest idea, you know, to lap dance on the devil and put out Nikes with blood in his shoe. I don't know if that's a great idea. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't do it. I damn sure wouldn't do it. I don't advise you to do it. You know, we'll see what happens. Because they're going to do it. You know, that's the thing about kids. They're going to do it anyway. You know what I mean? You just,
part the cultural norms, it feels like, are not what was set aside as a cultural norm. Feels like the younger generation is definitely breaking those things apart and being disruptive. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes for the better. Sometimes for the better. I mean, there's, you know, what they say, you got to break some eggs to make a cake, or I don't know what the saying is, but you know, so you know, there's no reason for me to try to stop it. I can't stop it. You know what I mean? But at least I can grab you by the coattail and be like, hey, I don't know if you want to jump off that cliff, bro. You know? So
anyone else have any comments on, I mean, on just in general, in terms of how generationally maybe we're seeing cultural appropriation, that it seems to be more problematic, I think, for older generation than it does seem to be for the younger generation. Are they helping to facilitate this, or is it in AKIR's note around what is our responsibility to the youth to be able to edify them and remind them of when they are not sort of following the right processes?
Yeah, I think older generations have always had problems with younger generations, especially older artists, when they see younger artists come. You know, I saw a lot growing up with people just dissing hip hop. It's like, oh, they're not even singing. It's just they're taking something that somebody else has done, you know, and to me that was a racial component to that, but there was also a generational component to not understanding how you can take bits and pieces of different completed works of art and put it together and make something original. And you know, I mean, I think, look, my parents didn't get what I was listening to. I'm sure their parents didn't get what they were listening to, and I don't always get what, you know, I hear on like Serious Hip Hop Nation, which I know is kind of geared towards sort of a golden demographic of, you know, 14 to 29. You know, I'm not always down with what I'm hearing, but I also realized that older folks weren't really down with what I was listening to when I was that age. So, you know, I think there has to be some grace and some understanding that younger generations are going to do things differently. They're going to take what came before and I don't know about improve on it, but do their own thing. And at the same time, you hope that somebody who's making money off of art has respect for the people who came before, the pioneers who made it possible for them to earn a living with that art. So, you know, that's where I come down on the whole generational issue.
Anyone else want to comment before we move to another question on that? No, okay. So Flex has a statement here I thought was interesting around one of Black people's and he has the says flex. I'm going to add that hashtag there. But one of Black people's greatest strengths is the ability to create great art at a rapid pace. How is it one of our greatest weaknesses is since we create so much art at a rapid pace, we're always out with the old and then in with the new. It was kind of sort of a dovetail off this last question. But while the old stuff really isn't that old, it is still dope. So other cultures gravitate to what we have left behind and stake their claim. Do you think that is true, or do you disagree with that statement?
That's definitely true. However, it's almost like we create something, we do it, and we move on to the next. And some people keep doing it. Then everybody else kind of gravitates and picks up on it. And then they do try to take it as their own and build on, like we can say, rock and roll is kind of one of the major ones that we see. Jazz has kind of done that, or not kind of, has done that. It's almost, but it's the thing about it is because the world is always changing, we're always moving, so we're always going to create a new thing. So the issue is whether we hold dear to the things that we created and left behind, and that's, I think, where our issue lies, is that others will hold it dear and start trying to do it and start making more off of it when we were like, okay, you know what? We did that. We're over here now. Let's keep doing this thing. And as soon as you get on this and you think it's the thing and you're on it, we're off to the next one again. Like, we keep moving because that's just our thing. Like, we've just been kind of ingrained with that because of how we have to keep generating things. Like, we don't have too much that we can hold on to, and really we feel we make a living from it, right? Like, it's hard for you to make a living at most things anyway. But when you're just creating things, like it's not like you're given a template on how to do it. You just create it and you continually create. You're trying to work it out. You're trying to figure it out. This is my thing. All right, cool. I'm doing this thing. I'm hustling on this. There's some other people doing it too. We're building on this thing. And then once it gets to a certain level, it's like, all right, it took so long for you to get there. The next generation is kind of like, all right, that's old. And they're moving on to the next thing. Like, it's kind of like, because that was what was happening, I think, for me in the early 2000s, when I was like, all right, I want to figure out what the next thing is going to be, because I already know hip hop, we're at where we're at. And you can hear, drum and bass, all these different things are coming. So what's going to be the next thing? Because I need to move over there and keep moving. If I stay in this pocket, I'm going to be an old rapper. Like, that's just how it's going to be, just because of how we are. Like, I'm going to be in the same not whack cadence, but the same cadence and flow. I can't rhyme like I'm Grandmaster Cass. Like, you've got to move forward. So with us, it's like, okay, you've got to keep moving it. We're always trying new things, and some of them catch. And when they catch, it's like, all right, cool, let's roll with that. Everybody else gravitates onto it, and then somebody's off to the next new thing. Holding dear to those things that we've already left behind, we leave that to the people who pick it up and go, oh yeah, I like that. But like I said, we've moved on. Like, and then you get to that space where it's like, who's going to be the crotchety old person who's like, well, it was so much better when you did it this way. Like, okay, I totally understand it. Like, and that's that generational thing. Like, it was, but like, so I can totally understand why parents felt that rap wasn't music. Now that I'm older, back then I couldn't understand it. Like, it didn't make any sense to me. It was like a weird argument. I'm like, what are you talking about? But now when I really look at it, it's like, oh, okay, I can totally see what you're saying. And I totally appreciate what you were listening to that made you think that this wasn't music. However, because I grew up in this, I appreciate it as well. I have a hard time appreciating the new wave of it. But it's going to take me time to gravitate towards that. So it's like, it becomes that pendulum swing of, oh, I was young. Now, as I get older, these things seem to, like, I seem to be acting like my parents or my grandparents. And it's like you're watching that whole process play out with the youth that you deal with and going, oh, wow, you listen to that? That's really what y'all call music nowadays? Like, so it's one of those things where generationally, we've kind of have to hold on to it. Because if you just always want to point fingers at the generation behind you, then that's the easiest way for you to lose control or lose hold of, that feeling, that actual gravitation, because it really is just music. They compartmentalize it into these genres because it has different pieces to it, but it literally is just music, and it really does come down to you going, okay, cool, this is what it's morphed into. This is that side of it. This is that thing of it. I still love James Brown. I still love, it's like history. If you don't pay any attention to it, well then you're doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past, and you're gonna think what you're doing is new when you don't realize that it was already done. So
yeah, Sheneka, Candice, I would love to hear your perspective on this, especially as it relates to thinking about, I mean, we're talking about this almost like, I call it like planned obsolescence of like phones. When they get built, they're already planning for the next phone. So it's just, is it hip hop only experience that, or does that happen with like R&B and soul music, blues and reggae as well, which seem like they're more based in paying homage as long as possible, that there isn't a need to constantly innovate.
Right. I think it's I think that's across the board, because audiences, as loyal as they can be, they have short attention spans, and that's with anything. You see that with even things like your favorite celebrity passing away. It eventually people just stop talking about it. If it's the type of jeans that all the girls are going Forever 21 to go get, they wear it for a while. I think, people have short attention spans. So you really are just grabbing what is in and capitalizing on it a lot of times. Teenagers are one of the huge audiences that kind of dictate style, and that within that group, whether it be music, what we wear, and it was for us growing up. I mean, that's how I express myself. But it's also, I was also a musician as well. I played saxophone, and all I did was play jazz, and classical music just all the time, when I was really young. But getting up higher into bands and certain people that I was playing with, I realized that there were older people that definitely heard the influence of my favorite saxophone player when they heard me play. They knew where I was trying to go with it. And as long as I was making it my style, I felt like it was okay. But I would hear full on solos being played, not like quotes thrown in here and there of sorry, I'm just trying to think. When I played with CI at the lounge and Frank Mitchell was playing saxophone with us, he always had a line that most people would say that's from Pete Rock and CL Smooth, but in every time he plays the song, he put in the in his solo, what is it? And so he would do that all the time in his solo, and so many people were like, "Oh, that's Pete Rock, CL Smooth." It's like, this song came before that. They use that, and that's okay. But they, how many people just didn't know that's what it was, So I think it's important in that aspect to kind of and to educate, but I also know that I see music platforms that will actually have the history um, the history of what some songs are, and I will go, and sometimes I will, if it's something I really like, I'll say see if it's the original or when the original came out. I'll take it upon myself as an artist to do that. So I just think as long as we are um, as long as we are able to do that and that aspect of it, I think because kids also are including everything. They're heavily they're including the sexuality, where before, I mean, yeah, that was something that people talked about, obviously, but I mean, I have a 17-year-old boy right now. I know that what he is dealing with right now, as far as music, school, friends, all that stuff changed. Nobody would be giving lap dances to the devil in a music video when I was that age. I'm not, I just don't see that happening without somebody's grandma being like, "What the is going on here?" You know, or auntie. My auntie would she'd be writing to whatever president that was. That's how serious it is. For my just for example, just for my family and being old school. So they're way more inclusive um, with what's going on um, with their sexuality. I didn't know anything about aromanticism. I didn't know anything about being an asexual. Any of those things I didn't know. So you're seeing a lot of changes in the culture. Period. Just and people are. Um, I mean, even if you're watching Netflix and you're watching and everything that you see, it's just times are changing and they're going in certain directions. People are picking up and taking things that they want, but we also take things back to a time. So 80s styles, asymmetric crop tops, like all these things. Just the culture goes back, then it comes back, then it goes back, and constantly taking things that they feel like they can. Modernize and make it theirs. They're constantly doing that right now, and things are happening super fast because, like I said before, people have short attention spans. So the music is going to keep coming out. um I mean, and then there's so many layers too, because our presidents are different. That changes, some things too. So there's just like there's so many layers to it to unpack, and right now it's hard to say with with the younger generation what is cultural appropriation or not, because I feel like there's just I would just put it to you like this: in a black household, the way the devil is being thrown around in these hip hop songs like that, like I said, somebody's grandma is going to throw some water on you. You're going to church with them the next Sunday. Something's happening. Change is going to have to be made. You know what I'm saying? So what we are willing to accept in society right now is a lot different as well. So and for any of you out there who think I'm hating on Lil Nas X, I'm not. I'm just trying to make a comparison
Or
about
beautifully uncomfortable. Yes, keep
okay,
speaking.
yeah, because my ass would have got beat. That's what I'm saying. Like it would have it I if it, yeah, like my mom had an issue with MTV, me watching MTV. My dad was the one who was constantly he was also a musician and an artist as well, so he had a little bit more of an open mind, whereas my mom came from a space and a time where you were to be seen and not heard, that kind of thing. So like I said, there's so many layers to unpack about this topic. It's hard.
Yes. I don't want to rush anyone. I know we're looking right at the last 5 minutes here. And I wonder if sort of any last minute thoughts. There's a question on sort of, well, will it ever cease to be? And there was even a question here I would have loved to get to on whether white people are guests in hip hop. And what does that mean? And I think Lord Jamar, and for people that may be following this argument of Lord Jamar from Brand Nubian and Eminem, and how that's come about, and that there's a lot more people, Royce, coming to Eminem's defense, a lot of people sort of recognizing that, what does it mean to be a guest in hip hop? And people feeling a little slighted by, like, am I a guest in hip hop, or am I a guest in this Black art form? Anybody want to maybe tail off on that and maybe give some closing commentary on this conversation? Muted. I said, whoa.
I'll do.
Pressure's on.
No, because I'm the guest. I mean, like I said earlier, it's important for me to recognize and to state, like, really clearly, these are Black art forms, and so, and I'm not trying to paint myself as something that I'm not. I just try to be authentically me and play music that I enjoy and that I love, and enjoy art that I love, and and so. Maybe, I don't know if guest is the right word, but I definitely feel like, honor needs to be paid and respect needs to be paid to the art forms, to the pioneers who came before. If I were ever so fortunate as to be able to earn a good living in art, I would owe it all to the people who came before, many of whom weren't able to make a good living. So that's where I come at it. I don't know if that's the right way to think about it, but that's how I process being. I mean, I'm Hispanic, so I'm an ethnic minority, but I'm a white person. I'm not a person of color, and nor do I pretend to be. But that's where I come at the issue of appropriation and art forms that are, a little bit have been mined a lot by white people and culturally appropriated by white people. But I think, when you go back, these are questions that have been asked all throughout history. I mean, when white jazz artists would have to deal with, a lot of the insults and things like that from Black jazz artists. Sometimes it was probably warranted, and sometimes it was probably over the top. It's not, that's not for me to say, and that's not for me to judge. White people have appropriated Black music the entire history of this country. So, I think for me, it's important to just show respect, show honor, listen, understand, and then just try to give back as much as I can.
Anyone want to chime in on last comments and that? Thank you, Ian, for sharing that perspective. I think so important to hear that from someone who navigates sort of these issues on a daily basis, I think. Anybody else want to, before we head out?
I'll just say this real quick. It'd be great if we all treated hip hop and the earth as if we were guests. It really comes down to that. If you had the respect of a guest in any culture, it would be, you would have, people would treat it with a little bit more, I don't know, I guess, respect. And that's all it comes down to for me. I don't really look at any particular color as a guest. I really think of it as, truthfully, a Black person from Midwest who only got to see hip hop from videos and what have you as a guest. Just because you are the skin color doesn't make you part of the culture. It's you actually taking it on and truly living it. And that's the only way. And to me, if we just treat it as if we were guests, then we would respect it more. We respect the earth more. So that to me, how it should be done.
That was so well said. I definitely agree with that.
I agree with you 100%. Well said. I think we're all guests on this planet, on each other's neighborhoods, each other's space. And as long as the respect is there and it's given, that's all that really matters. I think it's the lack of respect or the loss of respect while we're at this point where we need to have these conversations.
Very well said. Yes. About AKIR, any final thoughts from you?
I'm sorry. I received a phone call and it messed up my connection. I can barely hear you guys, but I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
You so much. Yes, we can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay.
Sometimes
and I invite you all to DM me and stay in contact, because we definitely have to try to figure out, something to better this culture and this process. Thank
Absolutely.
you for having me a part of this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, taking your time out for this conversation. We appreciate you.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Yes, thank you so much, all panelists. We really appreciated you coming and spending the time with us. And everyone for watching too. Thank you so much again. Go to www.wblinc.org to follow this conversation and look at the content calendar for all the different things that are coming up. Don't miss it.
Word, Peace, and Life, Fifth Element Live. The elements of hip hop are DJing, graffiti, breaking, knowledge, and
your mama.
Biddy, did you come here to play or did you come here to finesse?
We can't all get a pair of socks. I told you, Patrick, I was coming for you. I took you out. You're still whack, copy.